I wanted to share with you this book. It's called Hedge of Thorns, and it's written by John Carroll. Well, it's rewritten by Mary Hamilton, but it's one of John Carroll's book, and you see the date, you see the year that this was written. So I don't know if you have ever came across Lamplighter Publishing. If you have not, it is a must. It is an absolute must. The character that is shown in every book is simply amazing. So I wanted to share this book with you because it is one of the most powerful stories that I have ever read. My 8-year-old, well, he's almost, and 6-year-old love this book. They want to read it almost every day. We read books before nap time and before bedtime. Rest time, when you get that old, I guess you don't take naps much anymore. But they love it. So I wanted to read it and show you the pictures just that you can know. I mean, every book that Lamplighter Publishing puts out, this is the quality that you get. This is one of their children's books, so it's a picture book. Most of them are chapter books. But you go to their website, they have a guide. So if you have a certain age group or girls or boys, you will not be disappointed in the quality of the books. They are simply amazing. So, John Carroll's Hedge of Thorns. Well, hello, my friend. I don't know what has brought you here, but will you sit with me a while? I'm John Carroll, and I'm sitting here on the porch because the rays of sunlight warm me. You see, I am in poor health and seldom get visitors. How nice it would be to share my thoughts with you. Do you like the garden? The flowers are full of color. Look how this vine winds around the porch rail. A garden is full of life, isn't it? God has given us such things so that we may know a little bit about Him. Stay or go, you may take that thought with you. But if you will stay, I will tell you a story about that hedge of thorns way over there. So you will say then, oh, I am glad. It all began that day when my father came to me as I played alone by the pond. Son, he said, I have something to show you. When he knelt down beside me and pulled back the red cloth that was bundled in his arms, a tiny pink hand popped out. Wow! I squealed. My own little sister! I called her my little Belle and could hardly wait for her to be old enough to play in the garden with me. Days turned into years. I'd almost given up hope. Then one morning I heard my mother's voice as I ran out the door. Johnny, she called. I believe there was a bit of twinkle in her eye, too. Why don't you take Annabelle with you today? She smiled. I couldn't believe my ears, and I grabbed little Belle's hand so fast that Mother couldn't think about changing her mind. I wanted to show her everything. Look, Belle, I found the smoothest green pebble for your collection. And here's a shell with the snail still in it. Belle looked at the little treasure she had gathered in her hand and quietly whispered, Johnny, isn't God so good to us? Happiness filled my heart the day Belle entered my garden playground. I have kept this shell as a reminder all these years. She told me it was her favorite. One day, Mother and Father decided we should go to school that had just opened in the village a few miles away. Peering into the village for the very first time caught us breathless. The village seemed as if we were entering a whole new world. Mrs. Waring would be our teacher. She seemed to us to be as old as the Bible itself. So it is when you are very young. But I tell you, God must have smiled when He thought of her. She lived and breathed His word and was determined to teach us to do the same. Father and Mother worked hard to pay for our schooling. We were so poor that Father had to sell one of our cows to buy a Bible. As I look back, I can now remember how often Father and Mother went without in order for me and Belle to go to school. I wish I had said thank you more often. Let's see now, where was I? Oh, yes. Going to school meant we had to leave the garden by a path we had never traveled. But Belle and I liked an adventure, so I took up a little basket of lunch that first day, and with Belle's hand in mine, we set out together. For a long while we walked on the path that was thick and high with thorny bushes. The prickly fence loomed over us, forbidding us to turn left or right. We could see a meadow far ahead. It helped us to keep going, but then something caught my eye. "Hey, little Belle, do you see that apple tree across the hedge?" "Yes, brother," she replied. "I see it." The sky above the tree was so full of singing birds that it seemed to us that the gates of heaven rested on the other side. "If only we could find a way to cross over," I mused. "No, Johnny," Belle reminded me. "Father told us to stay on the path." But day after day that apple tree called out to me. Soon I could think of nothing else. I filled little Belle's head with countless reasons as to why we should find a way to cross over. She tried to turn my eyes from the forbidden way, but I slowly turned hers. Before long, I determined to turn my thoughts into actions. I would have my way. So one day after school, I stepped off the worn path that crossed the meadow. "Come on, Belle," I coaxed. "Help me look for an opening in the hedge over here." I didn't know that Miss Waring kept watch as we left school each day. "Children, why do you stray from your usual path?" she called. I had no clever answer to give her, and confess I only pretended to listen to the scolding that followed. "Come on, Belle," I grumbled. "Let's get back to that tiresome old path." I lay in my bed that night staring into the darkness. "What is so wrong about straying a little to pick some apples?" I groaned. My rebellious thoughts controlled me. I didn't want to pray. I no longer thought of the simple things of the garden or how much I loved my little Belle. Sadness filled me, and I cried until I fell asleep that night. I woke up the next morning more determined than ever. "Today I will cross through the hedge," I promised myself. We started off to school as usual, but as we approached the place where the apple tree stood, I stopped at a small opening in the jagged brush. Belle didn't know that I'd created it a few days earlier. "Belle, look here," I lured. "Surely you could fit into this opening. Once inside, you can make a way for me. We could take Mother and Father some apples." "Oh, no, Johnny," she pleaded. "The thorns, they are too thick and sharp." Fear filled her eyes, but I ignored it. Her love for me tainted her good sense, and she soon gave in. As I helped her inside, the prickly jabs made her cry out, "Johnny, the thorns!" Still I coaxed, and suddenly my desire so took hold of me that I pushed my little Belle deep into the thorny mass. Her screams of pain shook me out of my selfish trance. I grabbed her feet and pulled her from the thorny bushes. Streams of blood ran down her face, thorns stuck in her skin. My screams drowned out hers as I ran to the cottage with my little sister in my arms. "Mother! Mother!" I yelled. "Belle is hurt!" She came quickly from the cottage and pulled little Belle from my arms. I stood in the doorway as she washed Belle's wounds. Each little sob made my legs weaker. I slid to the floor. When Mother finished her work, she came and placed little Belle on my lap. How hard it was to look at what I had done. My confession spilled out until I was empty of it all. "Quietly," she said. "I see that you realize the wrong you have done. Remember that it was such disobedience that caused our Lord to feel the sting of thorns upon his head." Sadness filled my heart. When Father came home, it only grew deeper. He spoke to Mother privately. Then without a word, he took Belle from my lap and joined Mother by the fireside. I sat alone in the shadows. There would be no Bible stories read to me that night. I never felt so alone, and the night was never so dark. Father woke me early the next morning. He spoke softly as I followed him toward the path where my transgression had occurred. "John, please listen carefully," he urged. "God knows your every thought, and he places hedges about you to keep you in his way. Sometimes you will feel reined in by your mother and me, and another day poverty or illness may hold you back. This time, it has truly been a hedge. Remember that our hearts are deceitful. We must always ask the Lord to show us his way. Look here at the sparrow," he pointed. "God provides his every need. How much more valuable are we than that sparrow?" Then he asked, "My son, what made you blind to the apples in your own garden?" "John," he continued, "you will find many pleasures in this world. If you choose to run to anything that is not in God's will, He will let you go. But remember this. Once you leave His path, you will again know the pain you experienced here at this place. We climbed up a nearby bank, and my father lifted me high above his shoulder. "What do you see that your hedge has kept from you?" he asked. "Oh, Father," I gasped. "My little Belle would have been lost forever." "Then you see what God has spared you from." "Yes, Father. It is a steep cliff that was hidden by the hedge." I shuddered to think what could have happened. "Do you understand, John?" he asked as he lowered me from his shoulders. "The same thorns that have scarred your sister have also stopped you from sending her to her death." We walked in silence for a long while. I thought of the loneliness that had stayed with me through the night. I thought of my father's last few words, "to her death." And I thought of how God loved me so much that He stopped me before it was too late. I learned to thank God for His little hedge that day, and I never again looked unkindly upon it. Do you know why I tell you this sad story? I tell it because I hope you will learn from my painful lesson, and thus be spared of your own. This world will offer you things that will tempt you to say in your heart, "I must have it." My friend, turn away. Stay within the hedge that God has placed before you. Never think of crossing it. Pain and disappointment will surely follow. If only I had listened to my father's advice when he said to me, "John, never go beyond the boundaries that God has set for you, because you will harm yourself and those you love the most." Goodbye, my friend, John Carroll.